Hey guys, it's Samwise, and today we've got a video. So today, I'm really excited to walk you guys through a full guided build video of the ultimate 1080p gaming machine beast. This thing I put together on Black Friday using holiday sales to get under $1,000 on what I consider to be the ideal gaming PC. This thing's got ARGB lighting. This thing's got massive 2 terabytes of SSD storage, a 4060 overclocked from MSI, a great motherboard, all in an MITX case. You're gonna love it. Please remember to like and subscribe. I am a growing channel. I'm hoping to post more. I'm getting more stuff out there. I really appreciate your support. Happy holidays, whatever holiday you celebrate this time of year. I'm rooting for you, and I'll leave you with a cat cam. Happy holidays. Love you.
Okay, we are going to start our build here with the motherboard, as all great builds do. We're going to go through and add in our PCIe Gen 5 SSD, our processor, and our RAM. Then we'll take a quick break and then switch over to the CPU cooler. So, first things first, we'll do the NVMe SSD. This one here has 2 screws keeping it together. Most modern and more expensive motherboards will have NVMe heat sinks that are toolless for removal, which is actually a pretty nice little thing to have. It's not a huge deal to have to unscrew it yourself, but it does add a little bit of complexity. There we go. Okay, heatsink is out. You can see this is a cooling thermal pad here for the SSD, which we'll want to use. SSD that we're using here is a 990 Pro from Samsung. Basically the fastest Gen 4 solid state drive you can get. Heads up that honestly most people can't tell the difference between Gen 4 and Gen 5 drives, so don't feel like you need to spend a whole bunch of money on a fancy drive. If it's going to be super expensive, it's really not anything you need to worry about. Solid state drive, pretty simple install. I'm just going to go in like this. Sometimes you kind of have to finagle it at an angle a little bit, but that's in. You can see right now it's kind of elevated. We've got the solid state drive in here, that's properly in. We do not need any additional standoffs or screws with how this motherboard is configured. We just need the heatsink right here. Again, we removed this earlier. And make sure before you reapply your heatsink that you remove any kind of protector over this thermal pad. This will actually help cool your solid state drive pretty substantially. So it's okay, we're at a bit of an angle here. We're just gonna push that down, make sure this is aligned properly. As you can see, it should line up with the screw holes. Once you've got your solid state drive in, next thing up will be our RAM. I'm going with this T-Force Delta DDR5 RGB. This is 32 gigs at 6,000 megahertz. My understanding right now is that RAM much faster than this doesn't really make much of a difference with AM5 and AMD processors in general. There may be certain applications and certain use cases, but for gaming and day-to-day use, 32 gigs of 6,000 megahertz is going to be your best bet. The other thing you want to check on is your latencies. So you can see here, this is CL30 RAM running at 3676. This is some of the fastest 6,000 megahertz RAM that you can buy on the market right now. And it's going to look cool. It's got full RGB and all of that. So we'll get this unboxed and installed. Ooh, that's pretty cool. I like that. White RAM, RGB, Always a fun time. Now when you're installing RAM, obviously if you have 4 sticks from the same kit, you can just go 1, 2, 3, 4, not an issue. However, if you're only installing 2 sticks of RAM, you need to be cautious about which slots you're putting them into. So on this motherboard and most motherboards, I'm not sure I've ever really seen a deviation to this. If you have 2 sticks, you're putting them in the 2nd and the 4th slots. You can see there's actually a guide right here that tells you where to install your 1st and 2nd sticks. But that 2nd slot and that 4th slot is what we're aiming for today. Yeah, make sure you're aligned right. That would be beneficial. Now, this is going to require more force than you're probably used to or wanting to apply to the board, but that's okay. That's kind of just the story with RAM. So just get a firm grip on both sides, and you'll hear a very satisfying click when that goes in, and you'll know you did it right. Even I am timid here, right? Like it feels wrong. It feels like something's not quite right, but you can check and make sure everything's all aligned and get your slot in. So again, we'll make sure that's open, and then nice, firm, even pressure. And we heard another nice click. You kind of make sure that these are in snug, they're not going anywhere. You can kind of take a look and just make sure that they look straight and even with each other. That's all looking good. Everything looks seated properly. So there is your RGB RAM. Okay, finally and most excitingly, we have got our processor. So today we're building with an AMD Ryzen 5 9600X. So this is one of the new 9000 series processors from AMD. This is a 6-core, 12-thread processor, 38 megabytes of cache. It's got a base clock of around 3.9 to 4 gigahertz with a boost up to around 5.4 to 5.5 gigahertz. This is a really great entry-level CPU. It's super cheap and on sale right now. It's like under $250 at the moment. And it's going to run great in this build for 1080p gaming, for 1440p or 4K gaming. It's really going to depend mostly on your graphics card as far as your performance goes. So having just a solid modern CPU is really all that you need. I would not recommend this if you're doing heavy productivity tasks. So if you are oftentimes using programs like Blender or Photoshop or doing photo or video editing, you might notice that this is a little slow. But primarily for gaming and then just normal web browsing, Discord, that kind of stuff, this is a perfect processor. Cool things in here. You can see we have got the processor itself with a cool sticker. Do not forget to put your stickers on at the end of all this. You do have some literature here if you are interested. But what we want is this guy. We are going to get our socket prepared here. So we're just going to open this guy up. And tip it open. Now you want to be very careful. These pins that you see that are exposed here are very fragile. You do not want to get the wrong things mixed up in those pins. So very delicate. We have the processor open now. Just going to grab it on the sides and being careful not to touch the bottom of the processor, as that's where the contact pins are. And I'm going to very gently just drop it in. Now I'm aligning arrows, so I can see there's one up here, as well as little kind of plastic bits that are helping you get it in the right way. And I'm just going to drop it right in, not applying any pressure at all, just placing it into the slot, like so. Okay, I'm going to just give it a little bit of a wiggle, just to make sure everything is in, super solid. finally, we're going to close this back up. And we're going to close the thing, which will make this pop out and jump scare you. That's how you install a Ryzen CPU. Pretty simple stuff. We're in the socket and we're all set up. Okay, so next up we have our CPU cooler. So this is the V5 CPU cooler from Vetro. Nice little ARGB cooler, super budget friendly, great performance. You can see here, pretty tall fin stack, nice black color here. That should go nicely with our motherboard. You can see it's not too terribly high. When it's actually installed, it'll be just about the right size here. So CPU coolers can be a pretty intimidating part of the CPU building process, or the computer building process, but they really aren't too bad anymore. So for AMD, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna start by removing the screws on the pre-installed kind of brackets that surround the socket here. But now we have our CPU cooler. So you can see I'm going to remove this little kind of plastic bit before we install it. Now be careful during this process not to touch that cold plate, this copper area here, because any oils from your fingers can actually hamper the thermal performance of any CPU cooler. Same thing with the top of the processor. Try to avoid touching that. It's not the end of the world if you do, but you might want to get some isopropyl alcohol or something to clean that off, just to make sure none of your finger goop gets stuck there. So now we're going to apply some thermal paste. This is just the included thermal paste with the CPU cooler. This is probably fine. I mean, for this kind of build and for how low of heat this specific processor generates, I'm fine using this. If you were using a higher core count or a higher overclocked processor, I'd maybe consider upgrading to more of a name brand thermal paste. You can see pretty significant improvements from doing that, but for this build, for these purposes, this is totally fine. And really for any Ryzen 5 and most Ryzen 7s, besides like an X3D model, whatever stock thermal paste you get is probably fine. Plenty of schools of thought on how to apply thermal paste. It's not a fight that I want to have with anyone. I'm just going to do the X method here. You can do a P-sized, little drop in the middle. That's what you prefer. You can do multiple drops. You can just squirt it out on here and flatten it out, spread it out evenly, however you want to do it. I'm going to go with the X method. That seems to be one of the strongest methods to use. So I'm going to do that. And I'm just being careful not to get any of this down into the processor itself. That would not be ideal. So I'm going to kind of just dab it off there. That's maybe a little bit excessive on the thermal paste, to be completely honest with you. Came out a little quicker than I was expecting. However, it's okay to have a lot of thermal paste. It's not going to cause an issue. Where you'd have a problem is if you had too little. So I'm good with this. I'm going to live with that. I'm now going to align my CPU cooler. And this is kind of the part that throws people off a little bit here. If I can raise this up a little bit for you. So we're going to just align this evenly with those open holes on the back plate. And we'll just slowly go down. It's 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we're on. Pretty hard to screw that up. Just going in. An important thing here, when you are screwing in your CPU cooler, any kind of cooler that you get, whether it's water cooler or fan cooler, you want to go corner to corner. So we'll screw that top corner down a little bit, and then we'll move to this lower corner, get that one down a little bit. Okay, and we'll go to this right corner, get that down a little bit, and then to this top left corner. Okay, so we've got our tower cooler and the fins installed. Now it's time for the fans. So a couple things to remember with fans for CPU cooler is they are directional. So you want to check to see if there's a little arrow or something. You can also tell generally where these little black things are here is the back, and unobstructed view is the front, which means air passes in through the front, out through the back. That's how we want to align our fan here on the CPU cooler, because in our case, air is coming from the front, right? And this side of the motherboard will be facing towards the front of the case. Air is blowing in that way and exiting out this way through the exhaust fan. So we want to make sure that all the components that we install also are in that same alignment. So all air should be coming in through this way and out through that way as hot exhaust. So we're gonna get our cables tidied up a little bit here. Gonna get the fan kind of aligned, and then there's just these little fan clips, and they'll go into kind of the screw holes of the fan. These are so finicky and annoying. This is my least favorite part. For some people, it's the thermal pasting. For others, it's the putting this processor in the socket. For me, it's these finicky little fan clips. They're tough to get in, and they never want to sit quite right. Okay, now we've got those finicky little clips all in. You can see the CPU fan is now fully attached to the fin stack. We can just confirm that it's snug. Last thing we want to make sure we do here is get our fan and our RGB plugged into the right spots. So most motherboards, they will have a CPU fan header very close to where the CPU cooler is. Here you can see it's right here. So that's going to be our 4-pin fan connector. Now, if you're new to building or new to RGB and stuff, this 4-pin connector is just for the fan. And this will allow you to control how fast it's blowing and, like, you know, adjust that, but it will not control any of your lighting. So we're gonna plug that in first. It can only go in one way into the CPU fan header, but we're making sure we're plugging it into that specific header. Okay, that's in. And then for RGB, we're gonna use this addressable RGB here. Now make sure you're plugging ARGB into ARGB. And you can tell that because adjustable RGB will only have these 3 little connectors, right? You can see 1, 2, 3. That means it's a 5-volt, basically. If we try to plug it in to the full 4-pin non-addressable here, it's just not gonna work. So I'm leaving all these cables fairly tidy. I'm not really unraveling them, but I'm gonna make sure that I can get my RGB plugged in so I can control my lights. And that's in. So now we have our RAM, we have our CPU installed, we have our CPU cooler installed, we've got our NVMe solid state drive, that's going to be our boot and our data storage, and we're ready to move into the case at this point. I think we've got everything in that we need out here, so let's go and do that. Okay, now that we've got everything set up on the motherboard, we are good to get everything into the case. So here I've got a Montech 100 Air, I believe is the model. This comes with 4 ARGB fans pre-installed, tempered glass on the sides here, support for a couple more fans up top, and super value M-ATX case. So it is micro ATX only or mini ITX. This will not fit a standard ATX case or an E-ATX. But it's pretty sweet. And for like 50 bucks, I would say this is the best case for $50 out there right now. Even at 60 bucks, I think this is one of the best, especially if you're doing a small form factor build. That's really what this is ideal for. So all that I've done since you were away was get the power supply in, and I started routing just a few cables. This is generally how I like to set up a PC before I put the motherboard in. CPU power is over here, motherboard power. I've got the front panel connectors all pulled through, graphics card power as well, and then a few other little miscellaneous ARGB and fan headers at the bottom. So everything should already be pulled through. We're just gonna go ahead and get the motherboard now lined up on the standoffs and then screw her in. Okay, we should be good now. We're not covering any headers or any important cables. The I/O shield is pre-installed on this motherboard, so I did not need to install one there. So we're just gonna get this pushed in. Looks like we're a little low. Oh, there we go. I/O shield is in. There we go. And our standoffs are all lined up. So we'll go ahead now, screw the motherboard in, and then finish plugging in our various cables here. Okay, now that we have the motherboard screwed in, we're gonna start connecting all of our power cables and our data cables. So pretty easy with a mini ITX board or a MATX board. Really, there's only 2, 4, and 6 screws there, so nothing too bad. Sometimes those are just a little tricky to get to. But then the next kind of hardest thing is the CPU power, which you can see is this power port there. This one is never particularly easy. Click. That's what we want. So CPU power is in. We can kind of pull that cable back. See that there. Motherboard power is next. This one's quite a bit easier. Just take note that there are some tabs on this side of the power connector. We want to make sure that we're lining that up with the tab here on the actual cable. So we'll yoink that a little bit. We'll say sorry to our grommets. Getting a little bit abused. It's okay. So we want this to be... You're gonna have to play with these cables a little bit when you're doing your own build. It's okay to bend them if you need. About there. And then in, thread some of this back down. Not too bad. Okay, so now we have our CPU power, we have our motherboard power, our CPU cooler is all plugged in. We just need to do our front panel or our top of the case cables, and then our graphics card. So I'll go ahead and do that, then we'll swing back around. Okay, our cables are all plugged in. We've got all of our USBs, our HD audios, ARGB headers, normal fan headers, front panel connectors, USB 3 for the case, and yeah, we're looking pretty good. Power connectors are all in, CPU cooler is all good, everything should be getting power, everything should be getting data. So last step of the build here, well, the initial part of the build, I'm sure there'll be troubleshooting later, always factor in time for that, by the way, will be the GPU, so our graphics card. So first things I'm gonna do is just make sure that clip is pushed down. For this build, this little 1080p budget build, we're using an MSI Ventus Black 2 RTX 4060. This is the overclocked edition. Idea here is that pure rasterization should be adequate at 1080p with this card, but we went with a 40 series over a potentially cheaper 30 series because the 40 series has DLSS 3, which is going to allow for much more effective upscaling
for higher resolutions and frame generation. And that's really what we're going to rely on with this card. For higher frame rate gaming, we want to be utilizing DLSS as much as we can, and that's where this card's really going to shine. MSI makes a great graphics card, nice and small, will fit perfectly into our little micro ATX build. But yeah, this looks pretty sweet. Another beginner's mistake that I just made. Do we see a problem here? I'll tell you. I forgot to pull out the proper slots that we're going to need available out of here. And because this is a cheaper case, I'm going to assume these are probably single-use little pullouts. And I would be correct. So let me do that, then we'll get our card in. Okay, now that we have the slots out here, like you can see, they're just little metal brackets that on cheaper cards, you kind of just push out with your thumb. Now that we've got those off, we'll go ahead and get our GPU installed. We'll make sure everything is lined up with the slots, and push her in. Nice little thunk there, which is promising to hear. And everything looks to be good. So we'll connect our PCIe power to it. This is only 8 pins, so that keeps things pretty easy for us. Okay, and our power is connected. So final steps here, guys. We'll get the graphics card screwed in on the slots. We'll do one more overall check to make sure I got everything plugged in right and everything looks sound. I'll try to clean up the back a little bit. I'll show you that. And then we're gonna do our initial test boot. We should be all set. All right, we did it. After like 5 hours of trying to get all the hardware stuff in here and film it at the same time and making my own mistakes and learning and teaching along the way, we have finally completed the ultimate $1,000 1080p gaming budget build for the holiday season of 2024. So all the parts in here combined came to less than $1,000. We got full ARGB lighting, we've got a 4060 graphics card, we've got 9600X CPU, we've got 2 terabytes of storage, 32 gigs of RAM. This thing is a beast. And now we're gonna boot it up for the first time. So I genuinely have not tried this yet. I hope all the lights turn on. Fingers crossed. The switch has been switched. In 3, 2, 1. Well, look at that. It works. And I guess our lights of choice today are green. Very fun, very exciting. Here, do you want to get some of the computer? Looks like all of our RGB is working. RGB fans are on, our RAM is lit up, our CPU cooler is on. That all looks nice and good. I do think this button will change the lights. It'll either do that or destroy everything. Let's see. Oh, look at that. So you can change the lights with a button push. Ooh, there's a nice rainbow. Or to have it be controlled by your motherboard's software, you push and hold this button for 5 seconds, but I've got to get Windows and all of that going first. So for now, we'll just stick with this cool breathing rainbow effect, but if you come close, you can hear very quiet operation. Minimal fan noise from the CPU cooler or the 4 included fans here. Everything seems to be running well. So, yeah, we'll call that a resounding success. Thank you again so much for watching. I'm gonna get better at these. So don't worry if it's a little rough around the edges. I am gonna hire a professional cameraman too. Oh, that's my wife. But thank you again, seriously, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.